Hi, I'm Ashley and welcome back to my channel. So the time of filming this video is December 31st, so it is the final day of 2024. And just yesterday, I finished my last book of 2024. So I'm here today to share with you my 10 favorite books of 2024. And I read so many amazing books this year that it was really hard for me to make this list. So I do have 4 honorable mentions. So first, let's start with the honorable mentions. So the first one I have is actually a manga series. It is the 5-volume series, The Savers Book Cafe Story in Another World. It's very hard for me to compare manga to novels because they're just such a different medium, but at the same time I didn't read enough manga this year to make like a top manga list of 2024, but I did want to mention this because I love this series so much. This series follows a girl who gets transported to another world to be the hero of that world. But she doesn't want to be a hero. So instead she ends up running a book cafe, and at this cafe she ends up meeting another fellow book lover. So our story goes from there. I love that it was only 5 volumes long, so it's a really quick read. And I just love how like it's mostly cozy but has some stakes, and the romance was just super cute. And then the next honorable mention goes to a book that I read back in January and is A Fragile Enchantment by Alison Saff. And this one is a YA fantasy. So this one we have our main character who is a seamstress, but she is able to sew memories into the things that she makes. And so she ends up being invited to the palace to sew the wedding clothes of the prince and his bride. And I just love the whimsical fairy tale vibes of this. And I also loved the whole magic system as well, because you have all types of magic in here. You have Maeve who has her sewing magic, then you have the prince who has earth magic and he's able to make flowers and plants bloom. And the other thing I loved about this book was the romance. It was just super cute and sweet and also angsty. And then my third honorable mention goes to A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faizal. And this is a YA fantasy that has tea and vampires and heists and a cute kitten that rides on one of the characters' shoulders. In this one, I love the characters, I love how we get all their different perspectives, and I love the sense of found family that develops between our characters. And also this one ended on a terrible cliffhanger, so I need the next book like now. And the fourth and final honorable mention goes to The Dark Fable by Catherine Harbour. And this one is another YA fantasy. It follows our main character Evie, who ends up learning that she has magical powers, and she ends up being recruited by this group of thieves called The Dark Fable, and they also have magical powers. And so our story goes from there, and just know that this book, like, nothing is as it seems. I read this one back in May and I still think about it. I just loved how many twists and turns this one had. And again, this one also had the found family trope. And this one's a fantasy, but it also has a little bit of the horror element mixed in as well. And that for me, I found this year that can be hit or miss to me, but I really liked the element of horror in here. And there's like one scene in particular that like still stands out for me. That was just like a crazy scene in this book. So those are all my honorable mentions. So now let's move on to my top 10. So for this list, my top 4 are pretty much locked in, but anything below that is really fluid because it was really hard for me to like put those in any particular order. So I am going to start with number 10 and make my way up to number 1. So I actually have 2 books tied at number 10, and they are both fantasy romances. So the first one is Quicksilver by Callie Hart, and this one has pretty much been all over the book community, so I don't really think I need to talk about what it's about. So I loved how action-packed this was. I loved the banter between our main couple, and I also loved that the love interest right away gave our main female character a nickname. And also our main female character gets an animal companion, which is an adorable white fox. And I just love when they're animal companions in books. It makes a book like 100% better for me. And lastly, I also appreciated how the world building happens gradually in this over the course of the book, rather than it being thrown at us all at once. And also at spot number 10 is Bloodguard by Ceci Robson. And this one I read on my Kindle, so I do not yet have a hard copy. And this is the book that I just finished the other day, and I love this book so much. I will say though, do check the trigger warnings on this one before you read it because it does get pretty dark and violent. But this one follows 2 main characters, and what I really like about it is the first character we are introduced to is the main male character, Leaf. And he is a gladiator who is fighting in the Colosseum to become a blood guard. and he has to fight 100 battles in order to become a Blood Guard, and at the start of the book, he's only 4 battles away from becoming Blood Guard. And our other main character is Maeve, and we first get her perspective in chapter 4. And she is an elven princess, and eventually the two of them end up meeting and making a deal where Leif will marry Maeve, so she'll be able to take over the throne and free her father, who has been falsely accused of killing the previous queen, and getting him out of prison. And Maeve, in return, will do everything in her power to ensure that Leif becomes a Blood Guard. This one of my favorite things about it was the romance. I just loved how sweet and cute the romance was between Maeve and Leif. It was absolutely adorable. And in the same sense, I also just loved Maeve's whole entire family and how they all want what's best for each other and how they're always looking out for each other and will do anything for each other. That was just so wholesome. And so while there were those super cute and sweet moments that made my heart really happy, there were also very tragic moments that broke my heart into a million pieces. But by the end of this book, my heart was put back together again. And this book is supposed to be the first in a series. This one does wrap up Maeve and Leif's story really well. So I'm thinking like maybe the next book is going to be one that takes place in the same world but follows a different character. And so if you are a fan of fantasy romance and you really liked Quicksilver and you haven't read Blood Guard yet, then you should go check out Blood Guard. And at the time of filming this, it is on Kindle Unlimited. So now for number 9. So this one I read in October, and this one I originally read in my Gothic fantasy reading blog, and when I first finished it, I gave it a 4. But then by the end of the vlog, I had raised it to a 4.5. And I've still been thinking about this book, so now I have raised it to 5 stars. And that is the YA fantasy book, The Library of Shadows by Rachel Moore. Our main character in this one is Este, and she ends up going to a boarding school that is the 3rd most haunted boarding school in the nation, and over the years, 8 students have gone missing. And this book is a perfect read for spooky season and fall because there is a haunted library, good ghosts, bad ghosts, a mystery, and amateur ghost hunters in it. And even though I highly recommend reading this during the fall if you can, I also feel like it's a really good book to read any time of year because in addition to all those other things, it also feels like a love letter to libraries because our main character loves libraries and her dad did as well. And also it has a really super cute romance in it, and I really wasn't expecting the romance to be as cute as it was. So book number 8 is Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands by Heather Fawcett. So this is the second book in the Emily Wilde series, and I love this one. I think I loved it even more than the first one. This one definitely starts off a lot faster than the other one. It starts off right away with some action happening. And I also just love the first line of this book so much. And again, in this one, we get more of Emily and more of Wendell and more of their banter that I love. And I just love seeing their relationship develop. And I also love that we got the return of other characters as well, such as Poe, the little fairy that Emily befriended. And so I just love this one. If you have read the first one already and you haven't read this one yet, then go read this one. And also, if you haven't tried out the first book yet, then you should give it a shot, because I just love this series. Book number 7 is 5 Broken Blades by Mai Corlin. Oh, it's like really shining right now. That's distracting. Okay. So this one is an adult fantasy, and it follows 5 strangers that must work together to kill the God King. In this book, we get the perspective of all those characters, and I just end up loving the characters so much. And each character also has a love interest, which I also love because my favorite type of fantasy is fantasy with romance, and this did that very well. And this is also very action-packed from start to finish, and there were twists and turns in here that I didn't see coming, and crazy things happened in the end of this book, and now I need the second book right now so I can find out what happens next. So book number 6 is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. So this is another one that has been all over the book community this year. And this one features our main character who is a witch and her love interest who is a witch hunter. And I just loved this romance so much. I love the whole cat and mouse game that they played, and I just love the angst of their relationship. And I also really like the magic system in this one as well. And the ending of this, something happened that I was not expecting at all. Like, I expected something to happen, but I did not expect what did happen to happen. And so I desperately need to read the second book in this one. So book number 5 is Dragon Fruit by Makia Lussier. So this one is another YA fantasy, and it follows 2 main characters. So we have Sam and Hanalei, and they were childhood friends, but they haven't seen each other in years. But they end up reuniting and going on a quest to try to find a dragon fruit because it is the only thing that might save Sam's mother. And so this one, I just loved how warm-hearted this one felt. So this one had like the vibes and feeling of a cozy fantasy, but more high stakes. And it reminded me very much of Moana. I just loved how like generally kind almost everyone in this book was. It was just so refreshing. And I also love the depiction of dragons in here as well, because the depiction of them in here is different from what I'm used to. And also I love that there was a cute animal companion in here as well, but she is right there. So this one I would definitely recommend if you're looking for a more warm-hearted YA fantasy that will just leave you smiling and your heart happy at the end. So now we are down to the top 4, so these are the ones that were pretty much locked into their positions. And I absolutely loved all 4 of these. So let's start with number 4. So number 4 is Demon World Boba Shop number 1 by R.C. Joshua. So this is a cozy fantasy, and it reminded me very much of a mix between Animal Crossing and Legends and Lattes. And in this one, our main character is reincarnated into this fantasy world where ultimately everyone is just super kind, and our main character did originally live on Earth, and they had like a very tough time and they were just stressed out all the time. So their greatest wish was just to be reborn in a place where people are just generally nice and they can just live a nice life. And that is what this new world is like. So our story just follows them in this new world and getting to know the people there. And ultimately they end up opening a boba tea shop. And so this book is very laid back. If you didn't like Legends and Lattes, if you're not a big fan of cozy fantasy, you probably won't like this. But if you, like me, love cozy fantasy and you love reading it when you are burnt out and you just need to escape from the world and you just want like a book that feels like a warm hug, then this is the book for you. This is like my favorite cozy fantasy book that I've read yet in my life. This book does really just feel like a warm hug. And I read it when I really needed to read a cozy fantasy book, and it was just the perfect book. It put a smile on my face and I just felt so at peace reading it. So book number 3 is Darker by 4 by June C.L. Tan. And this one, I love this one so much. And in this one, our main character, Rui, is an exorcist in training. And through a mishap, she ends up accidentally transferring her powers to someone else. And this other person is our other main character, Yurin. And so Rui and Yurin, along with the help of another character, have to work together to try to get her powers back to her. So this one, I love the anime vibes of it. So it reminded me very much of Bleach, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Blue Exorcist. So if you are an anime fan, you might want to check this out. And also, I love the romance in here. So both Yurin and Rui have love interests, and I loved both of their love interests. So book number 2 is Where the Dark Stands Still by A.B. Portnick. So I read this in March, and it was at my number 1 spot until September when another book knocked it out of number 1. But this one follows our main character, Liska, who has magic, but she doesn't want her magic powers anymore, so she goes into a forest because there is a rumor that there's a magical flower there that will grant any wish. And she does see the flower, but she ends up running into the demon of the woods. And so she ends up entering into a deal with him where she will spend 1 year in his service, and he will also teach her how to use magic during that time. And after that 1 year is up, if she still doesn't want her magic, then he will get rid of it. And so this one, I loved it so much. I love the lyrical writing style in this. Everyone says it has Howl's Moving Castle vibes, and it 100% does. So if you are a fan of Howl's Moving Castle, you definitely need to read this. And then also the romance in here between Liska and the Demon of the Woods is just super, super, super cute and adorable, and also a little bittersweet. In addition to our main character and the love interest, there are also some precious and adorable side characters as well. One of those side characters is a ghost cat. So now for book number 1, my favorite book of 2024, and that book is The Temptation of Magic by Megan Scott. So this is another YA fantasy, and this one follows our main character, Nicole, and she is a supernatural creature known as an Imperial, but she has been hiding and resisting her true nature her entire life because if she reveals what she is, she'll have to go work for this organization that killed her mother. And then our second main character in the love interest is Cayenne, and he's also an Imperial, but he works for this organization. And his work ends up bringing him to Nicole's town, and he is there to track down this other supernatural creature that is responsible for the death of someone else. And their paths end up crossing, and the two of them end up coming to work together because Nicole is trying to uncover a message left behind in a painting by her mother, and this painting just happens to be a part of the collection that belonged to the person that was murdered. And so in order to still be able to study the painting, she ends up teaming up with Cayenne. And so we have dual perspectives in this, and this book very much gave me Twilight vibes. Like, there's a prologue that reminded me of it. And also our main character's sister, her name is Bells, and she has the power to see the future. So if you really enjoyed Twilight, I would definitely check this one out. Even though it has those similarities to Twilight, it is still very much its own thing as well. So with those Twilight references, this was a super fun read, and I also just absolutely loved the romance between Nicole and Cayenne. And also Cayenne is very much that tortured soul type of character, and that is like one of my favorite character types. So there's that as well. And this is a first book in a trilogy. So it does kind of end on a cliffhanger, but also I feel like the ending did wrap up what was going on in this first book really well, while still leaving some things unanswered. So those are my 10 favorite books of 2024, along with some honorable mentions. Let me know down below if we share any of the same favorites, or let me know what some of your favorite books of 2024 were. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!